You wake up with a fever tonight, and within minutes you know exactly what to do. Open a bottle, swallow a pill, wait for the ache to fade. It's so automatic you barely think of it as a decision. But for 300,000 years, humans faced sickness with almost nothing. No pills, no diagnosis, no idea what was actually attacking their bodies. And somehow, most of our ancestors survived long enough to have children anyway. So let's start at the beginning, not with a hospital, but with a person lying in the dirt, shaking with fever, surrounded by people who had absolutely no idea what was happening inside their body, and who tried to save them anyway. For most of human history, illness wasn't understood. It was feared. Nobody knew about bacteria, viruses, or infection. A person could be perfectly healthy in the morning and dead within days, and there was no explanation that made sense of it. So humans did what humans always do when they don't understand something dangerous. They built a story around it. Sickness wasn't biology. It was punishment, curse, or invasion by something unseen. And here's the part that surprises most people. That story didn't stop them from figuring out real solutions. It ran alongside them. Archaeologists have found something remarkable in Neanderthal remains in Spain, over 40,000 years old. Traces of chamomile and yarrow, two plants with almost no nutritional value, but well known for reducing pain and inflammation. These weren't accidental scraps of food. Dental plaque analysis shows these plants were deliberately chewed, not eaten for calories, but for their effect. A Neanderthal, tens of thousands of years before anyone had a word for medicine, already understood that certain plants made pain smaller. Think about what that required. Someone had to notice a pattern. Someone had to remember it. Someone had to pass it on. That's not instinct. That's the beginning of science, built entirely on trial, memory, and desperation. By the time modern humans spread across the world, this kind of plant knowledge had exploded into something enormous. Nearly every culture on Earth, independently, in total isolation from one another, arrived at the same basic conclusion. The world is full of medicine, if you know where to look, and you're willing to survive the mistakes along the way. In ancient Mesopotamia, clay tablets over 4,000 years old list prescriptions using willow bark to reduce pain and swelling. That same tree contains a compound called salicin. Your body converts it into something almost identical to aspirin. They didn't know the chemistry. They just knew it worked, and that was enough to write it down and use it for centuries. But here's what's strange. Not every ancient treatment was this reasonable. Some were terrifying. In several Neolithic burial sites across Europe, archaeologists have found skulls with precise, deliberate holes cut into them. Not from violence, from surgery. The bone around the holes shows healing, which means the patient survived, sometimes for years afterward. This practice is called trepanation, and it was performed on every continent, by cultures that never had any contact with each other. Somewhere in the ancient mind, there was a belief that pain, seizures, even madness could escape through a hole cut into the head, and in some cases, when the pressure inside the skull was the actual problem, it might have even worked. That should unsettle you a little, because it means somewhere in your evolutionary past, human beings were willing to cut into another person's skull with a sharpened stone, on nothing more than a theory, because doing nothing felt worse than doing something wrong. And that instinct never left us. Around 3,000 years ago in ancient Egypt, healers were doing something closer to what we'd recognize today. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever found, describes case after case with disturbing precision: symptoms, examination, diagnosis, treatment, even, in some cases, an honest note that nothing could be done. That last part matters more than people realize. An ancient healer, thousands of years ago, was already capable of admitting the limits of their own knowledge, instead of pretending they had all the answers. But that's not what most people picture when they think of ancient medicine. They picture magic, chanting, amulets, and they're not wrong to, because in nearly every ancient society, medicine and belief were tangled together so tightly they were often the same act. A healer in ancient Babylon might prescribe an herbal remedy and a ritual incantation in the same sentence, treating the visible symptom and the invisible cause at the same time. Here's the terrifying part. From the outside, this looks irrational, but from the inside, it was a completely reasonable response to uncertainty. If you don't know why disease happens, and something you did seems to correlate with people getting better, you repeat it. Every single time. That's not superstition failing you. That's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. Finding patterns in chaos, even when the chaos refuses to fully explain itself. And this is where everything changes. Because as civilizations grew larger, something had to shift. In ancient Greece, around 400 BC, a physician named Hippocrates proposed something radical for his time. Illness wasn't a punishment from the gods. It came from natural causes inside the body that could be observed, tracked, and treated based on evidence. This idea didn't erase superstition overnight. It took centuries, but it planted something that never fully went away again. The idea that the human body could be studied like anything else in nature. Meanwhile, in ancient China, physicians were developing acupuncture and complex herbal systems based on thousands of years of accumulated observation. In India, Ayurvedic medicine was cataloging hundreds of plants and their precise effects on the body. None of these systems had laboratories. None of them had microscopes. What they had was something far slower and far more painful. Generations of trial and error, written down, refined, and passed forward, one patient at a time. So here's the full picture. For nearly all of human history, medicine wasn't a science. It was a desperate, ongoing negotiation between fear and observation. Every remedy that worked was discovered by someone who was willing to try something on a dying person, with no guarantee it would help, and no idea why it sometimes did. You take that pill tonight without a second thought. But somewhere underneath that convenience is a Neanderthal chewing bitter yarrow to dull an ache they couldn't explain. A healer in Mesopotamia stripping bark from a tree because it had worked before and hoping it would work again. A skull with a hole in it, healed, proof that someone lived through a decision no modern doctor would ever attempt without an operating room. We call it medicine now. But for most of human history, it was something closer to faith with a slightly higher survival rate. And maybe that's the part worth sitting with. Every treatment you trust today exists because someone, somewhere, thousands of years ago, refused to accept that nothing could be done. They didn't know what they were building. They tried anyway. If ancient humans could fight illness with almost nothing but observation and desperation, imagine what else they figured out that we take for granted. That's what Yedd is for.